And when I found it in the trading post, I asked the guy that had the place, I said, Charlie, what's that doing in that case? He says, I found it out in Arizona. He said, and I thought I was on a buying trip, and I thought it was going to be great. Got back, haven't sold a thing in 6 months. I said, that pipe needs to come out of that tray case. You don't sell the pipe. He says, yeah. He says, I've been kind of thinking that. He said, I was fooling around in here one day, and I plugged that stem into that bowl. The temperature dropped about 10 degrees in here, and the hair stood out on the back of my neck. I said, Charlie, you should have loaded the pipe and prayed with it. He said, I don't know nothing about that. I said, well, it needs to come out of here. He says, yeah. Spent $450 on that. I said, I ain't buying a pipe from you, Charlie. You know, I ain't stupid. I ain't gonna play Russian roulette with no single shot pistol. He said, well, get it out of here. So that's how the pipe came into my care. And I don't know that it's going to stay with me, because I honor another pipe that's 500 years old from the Smoky Mountains. And a younger chanupa that the Carissa Comacrudo people here in Texas presented me, because I got them some measure of recognition. And it's funny, they're right down there close to George Bush's ranch too. When he was governor, he said there ain't no Indians in Texas. Folks, I'm here to tell you something. The Caddo, the Kashai, the Tonkawa, the Karankawa, Coaltecans, Yaqui, Tarahumara, the Cacalote, the Carissa Comacrudo, allegedly extinct. If they're extinct, I know a bunch of lively ghosts, because I meet them every day. And they've been generous enough to take this old orphan that didn't know anything about his heritage in and share their life with me. So, like I said, I'm having the time of my life. Anybody want to ask me something? Because I can stand up here and blow smoke all day long. So.
Yeah, you know about that Kula Kula?
No, sir, I don't.
Was supposed to be dragging your new father, the little carpenter.
Yeah.
Went back to, King Henry II, and then we returned back. And then the reason why we got to know about that is because the letter that was wrote by Captain John Stewart.
You realize that we're hereditary enemies here. I'm a captain.
At any rate, you know, history.
Yeah.
And what the deal was, how all this came about was Linda painted portraits.
Uh-huh.
And she was asked by the sitting chief at the time of the Chickamauga to paint the first chief, which was Dragon Canoe.
Yeah.
Well, there was a deal that happened. She said, well, I can paint anything, but what did he look like? Because there's never been a picture of him.
Yeah.
So the tribal shaman, Richard Craker, said, hey, we have a letter in our archives wrote by Captain John Stewart. And he was a Scotsman. And he said he described him in his letter. And he described the women, he describes the town, all this kind of thing, from Chota to New Chota and all this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and stuff that I'm not really linguist on it. But at any rate, at Kula Kula was supposedly dragging to his father, a peace chief that went to the 5 friendly tribes.
Yeah.
To see King Henry. And in that time, let's delve into a little bit more. And they discovered this campaign of Indians discovered what the English or Henry was about up to, and they were going to kill him. But they didn't. They got transferred back to this continent, and what it all started off with was John Stewart had he was a captain, and they went to Fort Lawton. And there was a commander there by the name of DeMar, and he had put 21 Indians, killed 21 Indians. So the Indians came in and took over Fort Lawton and Stewart was there. And it's quite a deal. Anyhow, he was writing this story back to his sister, Patty, in Edinburgh, Scotland, and telling of his adventures and fall into America. And it's kind of interesting, but that's where Apakula came.
I'd love to see that portrait.
Yeah.
You just brought some 5 civilized tribes. I got the biggest kick out of this,
That's what
folks.
they call them.
We got drafted into the Lone Star Color Guard, the Sons of the Confederate Veterans, representing the Cherokee Mounted Rifles. From Stan Whitey's crew. Of course, there was both sides. They were on both sides of the fence. But they ended up, the Cherokee Mounted Rifles had their own flag. There's an example of it here. Well, I just found a symbol. The field of the white stars representing the states that seceded from the Union, and in the center, there's 4 red stars. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. There were 5 red stars. That represents the 5 civilized tribes. And then one day, one of my Blackfoot brothers walked up and handed me this. Now, I'm going to pass it around because it's I thought the Civil War was over. This is a seal of the Southern Cherokee Nation. And it was established November the 27th of 1834, which kind of predates the Civil War. And it's still the seal. The Civil War is not over. And like I said, I have a ball. How many gun nuts do we have in here? Yeah, good. I have an 1860 model Army that my father owned. Let's see, are you in here? Of course you are. Somewhere. Or my son took it out. Nope, there you are. It's a replica, but it does have collector value. And it was made for my father. So anyway, I've got this little cap and ball pistol I'm going to start wearing. Sons of the Confederate Veterans. And a historian says, that's not authentic. Well, what are you talking about? He said, the only way one of them Southern Cherokee would have been carrying an 1860 model Army is if he took it away from a Yankee. I said, that was known to have happened. He said, well, yeah. He said, what you need to be authentic is a Griswold and Gunnison. I said, what's a Griswold and Gunnison? Well, it was a copy of the Navy Colt, 1851. Then they made 3,000 of them in the South. And then Sherman come along and burnt the factory down. You talk about a terrorist. I mean, that cat done a number. And if I could find a real 1851 or Griswold and Gunnison, you're looking at what, $1 million? He says, I've got a replica one. I said, how much you want for it? He says, I want a shotgun like yours to kill snakes with. So I went and bought him a new little 410 shotgun, and he traded me a Griswold and Gunnison. And I think they're prettier than the Colts. And seeing as how I'm representing the Cherokee Mounted Rifles, I hand carved me some prayer feathers and then laid them in the gun grips. Now all the guys are wanting me to inlay their weapons in the Sons of the Confederate Veterans. I told them I'll do it as long as it stays fun. If it gets to be like work, I quit. Because I'm enjoying life now. And my dream, eventually, is for sovereignty rights and recognition within the Republic of Texas for the Shaagiyeli, our people, and to see a coming together of the Cherokee that are in Texas because, like I said, they're the most factionistic, divided people on the planet. As far as I'm concerned, the word politic, poly, Greek word meaning many, tick, blood-sucking parasite. Amen. And I'm tired of it. So I apologize for being politically incorrect if it involves a lie. And I apologize in advance because I've drawn a line in the sand and I'm raising enough stink that I've already got the state of Texas mad at me, which is all right. I could care less. And because I love my country and I love my people. And the Bible that I read, that's funny, we're in a Methodist church because my uncle was a Methodist and my grandpa was Baptist. They'd get out on the porch swing with their Bibles and start debating, and we'd have to go out there and break it up. But it reads that our Creator will make of all men one nation. And I long to see that.
Are you Cherokee?
Yes, sir. Well, Cherokee, Catawba, and Choctaw. The Catawba are extinct, except I haven't quit breathing.
That's not all I got to me. My mother was born in Cherokee County, close to Nacogdoches,
Yes, sir. That's down there in,
1898.
you betcha. Well, it's funny because I wish I'd have brought pictures of my grandparents and my daddy and his two brothers. My Lord, they look like a war party. They could be a war party, come to think of it. And, but it wasn't a good idea to be an Indian in Texas in the 40s and 50s. As late as 1962, they were still taking Indian children from their families and adopting them out and closing the records in the United States of America. One of my Navajo sisters, I'm adopted Towering House Clan Dene. I have ties to many nations. I don't know what's going on. She told me that she had an aunt who went to a hospital to have a baby. They knocked this woman out, took the child cesarean, and they removed her ovaries so she could have no more children. And this was in 1954. I don't know what's going on. So you understand why I don't like government, I don't like politics. I like the community that's described in 1 Corinthians. I submit to you, they say that Greece is the birthplace of democracy, horse feathers, and buffalo burgers. In this country, if a decision needed to be made within the village, the whole village gathered around, and everybody in the village had a voice, as long as they held the talking stick. I love that. I've got the talking stick, he said. From age 5 to 95 or 105 or 145, they had a voice. And then the council made a decision based on the input of everyone in the tribe. Then they had to take it to the clan mothers and say, this is the decision we made. What do you think? And if the women said, it didn't happen. But the point of the being, it was a real democracy. It was not a representative democracy. And they came here and messed it up. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Iroquois. We were taught in school that both the men, the women, and the children cast their vote for the chiefs. Whoever the two chiefs were, they would stand in front of and they would come in and they would put the stone in front of what chief they were voting for, and at the end they would count the ballots. But senator is from the the Iroquois too.
Yeah. Well,
and a lot of what is in the our Constitution did come from the Iroquois, which the state of Connecticut, which is known as the Constitution State, took a lot of that out of the Iroquois.
that's where Jefferson and Franklin and company got the ideas for the United States Constitution. At one time, the laws of the Iroquois and Confederacy were written on the walls of the Capitol of the United States of America, but they've covered it up and wiped it out. And now look what they're doing to our Constitution. It makes me cry. But I could be an angry Indian. But if you're angry, you will accomplish nothing. So I try to find the humor in it. I got my younger son, I wish he could have come tonight. This kid could have fun in the middle of a tornado. And he is an absolute hoot. He's gosh, he would be a 7th generation Texas Cherokee. And if he hadn't been so worn out when he got home, he would have showed up wearing a deerskin scout shirt. A real one. So we're having a blast. We're having a blast. And I didn't know there was something like this over here. The other time I came to Winnsboro, they were having the Winnsboro Wild West days. I almost didn't get out of there with these two things. Those cowboys wanted them. They was going to hold a raffle and hang an Indian. But had a lot of fun. But then meeting Mr. Bill, and Bill, I'm not kidding. I am having the time of my life. This coming weekend, Saturday. Everybody know where Camp Ford is in Tyler? The Confederate prisoner of war camp? There's going to be a whole bunch of rebels down there, and they'll probably be running around shooting cannons and running back and forth. And myself and Bear, we're hoping to put up a booth down there, and we're going to be selling a lot of Indian jewelry and craft work down there. We were invited to do this, and so far I guess we're the only ones that's been invited to do it. But I recommend you go to watch it, just watch the horses when they're doing the reenactment, because those horses get into it, man. One Yankee threw down his gun, stood up, said, "I surrender," and the horse like to run out of Hunter. He said, "There's another one over there in the draw, let's go get him." It's a hoot. But
Where is that camp?
it's, as you're going down, 155, just before you get to Tyler, it's on the left down there, Camp Ford. And it'll be all day Saturday.
155
Or is it 155
or
or?
151.
It's either two spots.
Going out toward Palestine?
155, yeah,
Yeah, it comes in.
155. I can drive it, I just can't tell you how to get there. But anybody want to ask me anything? I may have an answer, I may not. Yes, ma'am.
You touched on it just a little bit while ago. What connection are you to Bushy Head? Not Bushy Head, but, yeah.
Reverend John Hass,
Yeah.
he's my great-great-great-grandfather.
Are you also related to the Sizemores? The Sizemores?
I'm not sure.
Because I'm related to the Bushy Heads and the Sizemores.
Okay. Well, they called him Bushy Head. I think his wife was a Bushy Head.
Well,
And you know how you took on your wife's claim?
yeah. Well, how I became a Bushy Head is through this same thing Gary was talking to you about. When Captain John Stewart married into the tribe, and then his son was, started becoming prominent.
No dude.
They called him, in my lineage, they called him no due to Bushy Head, the son. That was the name they give him. And then the son after that was called Bushy Head as well. But the reason where the name Bushy Head came from, because the Scottish had bushy hair.
I know.
And that's where Bushy Head came from.
That's something.
I've got that straight puppy fur of the Native American people.
But it shows John Stewart.
Yeah.
And then it shows his son is no due to Stewart, and then it says no due to Stewart Bushy Head. And then
Wow.
from there on, it's Bushy Head.
I think Reverend John's wife was one of the Bushy Heads. I do know they took his chapel apart and carried it on the Trail of Tears to Oklahoma and put it back up there at where the Trail of Tears ended. I've never been there. I just recently found out about this. He somehow, when the Dawes started coming into being, because it predated the final Dawes roll by many years, he said to heck with you, and he was a reservee for having fought in the War of 1812. He went back to Alabama, and I recently found a deed that he purchased some land, and it was registered in Lebanon. It wasn't in Lebanon. It was somewhere in Wills Valley up there, close to Pisgah. And the deed, he purchased 40 acres of land, paid for it, and the deed was signed by President Polk. I have a copy of that. But then he and his son Peter are buried there in Wills Valley. But Peter's son, James Marshall Hass, came to Texas, and his wife was this Sarah Elnora Truitt, who was the daughter of the man that we will be honoring June the 14th. And it's just incredible how interwoven the history of the Cherokee. Folks, if you think they were in North, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama, you got another thing coming. They were as far north as Indiana, up in Kansas and Missouri, and as far west as western New Mexico before this was a nation. I blew a transmission in western New Mexico. I'll never forget the day as long as I live. If we'd have made it that last 1 mile over the top of that mountain, we'd have been stranded in eastern Arizona, where there's a whole bunch of nothing. And I managed to get our Ford Explorer turned around, and we coasted 19 miles back down that mountain, and my grandkids, my granddaughter is, whee, and my grandson, we're gonna die. Reserve, New Mexico. There is a rooster poo nowhere, and Reserve is 62 miles on the other side of it. We were stranded there for 5 days. Everyone in that town, population of 325 people, is descended from Cherokee people. So, I don't know whose history to believe anymore. Yes, sir.
I'm Cree.
Good
I'm
people.
from the Algonquin family, which was the largest nation in North America. So how did we fall in with the Cherokee as far as, the Algonquin nation is...
Those Blackfoot.
Now we were out, yes, I met him over there, and I said, we belong to the same family.
Yeah.
And
all right.
we originated out of Sherbrooke, Canada, and Quebec, which was...
The lines weren't that solid. And like I said, the men can Blackfoot. Now, okay, depends on whether you were north, east, south, or west. You might be called Anishinaabe, Ojibwa. You know, as a matter of fact, I know a Blackfoot just moved back up to Michigan, and it's driving him nuts. He knows some of his people are around there. Every couple of weeks he walks out and there'll be 10 pounds of wild rice sitting on his head. He's a descendant of Gray Owl, Bear Clan, Blackfoot. When they made their migration south to find a Cherokee wife, they don't talk about the fact that a lot of those Cherokee women had their bags packed because they were treated like royalty up there. I'm sure that some of the Cree and the Chippewa and those guys came along with them going, where are you going? Yeah, let's go. Because I don't care what history says or Hollywood says, we weren't going around killing one another all the time. We were too busy making a living. The Carissa Comacrudo people, 7 clans of them, and the Cacalote clan is still the most active here in Texas. The Cuatacamato, not so much. They kind of decided to go ahead and be black. Cuatacamato it means burnt skins. And folks, they were of African descent, and they got here before the white man did. But every year, the Carrizo Comocroto would send out runners down into Old Mexico, up the Rio Grande, into what is now New Mexico, all over Texas. Hey, party time down here at the mouth of the Rio Grande. And they'd all gather up down there, and it was time for games, trade, alliances, courting. So I don't care how we're painted out to be. Goyacla, Geronimo, one of the baddest of the bad. The last one to lay down arms. The last free Indian. Among his people, if you killed your enemy in warfare, you weren't allowed to return into the village unless you were cleansed by the tribal elders. If you took a life, you took something you could not give back. Only the Creator can give life. So we've gotten a bad rap out of history. But we learned. When the Western European came here and started pushing people off their lands, and what's this scalp taking crap, you know? We learned that from Scots. And the French. Yeah, the French caught on to that real quick too. And I do carry a traditional scalping knife. I have one.
But the Appalachian Trail, which was the hunting trail of the Indians.
Yes, sir.
So up in the north, when it became wintertime, you know, they had to come down the Appalachian Trail. That was the only trail they used, coming down from the hunting grounds. And that brought them down in. And the way I heard it was that some of them didn't go back.
Oh, no.
And that's, I don't want to start an Indian war here, but it's really how the Cherokees started off.
Well, that's quite possible because the language similarities are absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
What's really hilarious, okay, Columbus discovered America.
Never was lost.
You know, and us men are still like that. We won't stop and ask for directions. Eric the Red got here. And boy, he covered a lot of territory. I wanted to see the Viking rune stones in Oklahoma. So we drove up there one weekend. My wife went along with me. Now, I had heard stories of a Welsh druid somewhere around 100 AD or 200 AD that came over from the British Isles, found what he liked and returned and gathered up his people, came over here and settled down among the Mandans on what is now the Missouri River. Now we're talking, 1800 years ago. I notice the history books don't mention the red-haired, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, green-eyed people among the Mandans on the Missouri River when Lewis and Clark crossed this country. However, every time some farmer in Oklahoma plows, he finds a new rune stone. They're all over the place, breaking many plow points. But they can translate these Viking runes, and I have seen Medoc's name, that Welsh druid,